anomaly resolution. Formerly known as the UAP Task Force, recently renamed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or ARRO, to investigate and identify what are now hundreds of reported sightings. So far, they have not confirmed any of them to constitute proof of alien life. Officially, the government continues to state, we are indeed alone. But now, for the first time, a former member of that official investigative team is speaking out, telling a stunning story that impacts every person on this planet. And now you're about to meet that man for the very first time in this exclusive television interview. Welcome. Have a seat. Maybe start off telling me your name and who you are.
My name is David Grusch. I came from a blue-collar family in Pittsburgh. I didn't have the money for college. Always admired people in uniform. And I've always wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself. 18 years ago, I got an Air Force scholarship for physics. I originally commissioned on active duty in the Air Force. Served 14 years in the Air Force.
I look at this photograph, Dave, and I see a very proud officer.
I was getting promoted to captain when I was deployed.
And you still love your country, don't you?
Absolutely.
A career intelligence officer, Grusch spent time on the ground in Afghanistan and other places he can't mention before rotating back to Washington.
I was an intel officer for the U.S. for 14 years. My last position, which I left in April of 2023, I co-led the UAP portfolio for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and some of the highest officials within the Department of Defense and Intelligence community used to call on me to advise them on some of the hardest target sets that the country had.
You are one of the most trusted former intelligence officials in the US defense and intelligence establishment.
Yes, I was.
You were trusted with the most intimate secrets.
Yes.
And he says the most earth-shattering of those secrets were revealed after 2019, when he was invited to join the UAP task force. You had the security classifications to go anywhere and ask anyone anything.
I had, based on my formal security clearance and multiple polygraphs, I had the ability to be read into any program that I needed. At one point in time, I was extremely highly cleared.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No. I thought it was totally nuts, and I thought at first I was being deceived. It was a ruse. People started confiding in me. They approached me. I have plenty of current and former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me they were a part of a program. They named the program. I've never heard of it. And they told me, based on their oral testimony, and they provided me documents and other proof, that there was, in fact, a program that the UAP task force was not read into.
You are alleging that the US government has been concealing the existence on this planet of alien life.
I would couch it as non-human intelligence, NHI, like we would like to say in our language.
Why do you say that? Why do you say NHI?
I don't want to necessarily denote origin. I don't think we have all the data to say, oh, they're coming from a certain location. And I couch it as somebody who studied physics where Maybe they're coming from a different physical dimension, as described in quantum mechanics. We know there's extra dimensions due to high energy particle collisions, etc. And there's a theoretical framework to explain that. Yeah.
Just let me cut to the quick, though. You're saying there is an intelligent species engaging with this planet?
Yes, that's potentially extraterrestrial. Yeah.
I speak for everybody sitting at home. That is a shock.
It was to me, and I had a lot of sleepless nights.
Grusch says he's never personally seen non-human intelligence, but he's spoken to enough people directly involved in what he calls the program that he's convinced it's real.
I started out as a non-believer. I came to the problem as a hardcore physics guy, intel officer, so I have a, excuse my language, high factor. I was very methodical, interviewing people who didn't know each other, making sure this wasn't some kind of cover-up of some other program.
He says he pressed to gain direct access to this program, and that's when his trouble started. Grusch claims his investigation was stymied, his requests for access rebuffed.
They shut the door in my face. They denied me access to these programs.
Soon after, he says, he endured reprisals and retaliation from above. He then reported that information to the Intelligence Community Inspector General. That's why he's filed this whistleblower complaint. He says that experience is why he decided to go public here and in a recent article written by Leslie Kane in The Debrief. You're not being paid for this interview?
No, I'm not.
Why are you doing this?
It's a sense of service, Call me a Boy Scout or whatever. When I saw the kind of wrongdoing I did, I don't want to be 60, 70 years old in the future and have that, coulda, shoulda, woulda kind of feeling where I could have made a difference. I do not want to live a life of regret.
You are saying to the human race, for the first time, an official intelligence representative at a high level from the US government is saying publicly, we are not alone.
We're definitely not alone. Absolutely, the data points empirically that we're not alone, yeah.
You've said that the United States has spacecraft, intact craft.
We do.
Do we have bodies? Do we have species of
Well,
non-human?
Naturally, when you recover something that's either landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots. And believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds, it's true.
Have you seen spacecraft?
I've seen some interesting photos and I've read some very interesting reports.
But, he says, the specific documents and photos that would prove his claims are still classified, and he cannot disclose them here. Let's deal with the issue of your credibility. Why should we believe you? You're just somebody coming out of nowhere, making claims that we really ultimately can't prove.
Yeah. Well, we provided the proof internally to the Inspector General and the Hill staff, and we went into all the details. I mean, I have the credentials. I was an intelligence officer on the UAP task force.
But let's face it, allegations of aliens and their spacecraft are hard to accept, even coming from a respected insider. Even if you call them NHI and UAP, how could such NHI travel to Earth in the first place and go undetected by the general public? Grusch says the craft may not be travelling through space as we understand it.
It is a well-established fact, at least mathematically and based on empirical observation and analysis, that there most likely are physical additional spatial dimensions. And you could imagine in 4 and 5D space where what we experience as linear time ends up being a physical dimension in higher dimensional space, where if you were living there, you could translate across what we perceive as a linear flow. So there is a possibility that, and this is a theory here, I'm not saying this is 100% the case, but it could be that this is not necessarily extraterrestrial, and it's actually coming from a higher dimensional physical space that might be co-located, right here.
What can you tell me about these craft, these technologies? Why do you know it's exotic?
Based on the very specific properties that I was briefed on, isotopic ratios that would have to be engineered for it to be at those levels, but also just extremely strange, heavy atomic metal, high up in the periodic table arrangements that we don't understand, what the emergent properties are, but there's just a very strange mix of elements.
So you're absolutely sure that the materials that these craft are made of are clearly not of this earth?
Yeah, they're sophisticatedly engineered, certainly not by humans.
And while Grusch says the US has gleaned some insight from these materials for military use, so much more could be done if academia and the private sector had access.
It's totally nuts that humanity as a whole, especially the U.S. citizenry as a whole, they're not even benefiting from broad research on this to solve propulsion, energy issues, novel material science that can improve people's quality of life. It's just totally nuts how it's been protected and inhibits progress.
If you're right, if you're telling us the truth, everyone, the entire American public, has been lied to for decades.
Yeah, there's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the U.S. populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral.
Coming up, how long has this been going on?
I'm going to increase the screen size real quick. This is where a commercial break was. 1 second. That way it is bigger on the screen. And I will continue.
A lot of the things I was briefed on were very shocking.
So let's start from the very beginning. You say it's a 90-year cover-up.
Just about, yeah.
90 years?
1933 was the first recovery in Europe, in Magenta, Italy. They recovered a partially intact vehicle.
It's long been known that the regime of dictator Benito Mussolini documented numerous UAP during this time. This internal memo from the Italian secret services includes crude drawings of the UAPs. It's true, it's real.
Yeah, that actually happened. Italian government moved it to a secure air base in Italy for the rest of kind of the fascist regime until 1944, 1945, and the Pope Pius XII back-channeled that.
So the Vatican was involved?
Yeah, and told the Americans what the Italians had, and we ended up scooping it.
So let me be very clear about this. You're saying that the Catholic Church, the Vatican, they know about the existence of non-human intelligence on this planet?
Certainly.
Grusch says shortly after the dawn of the atomic age, another major crash recovery took place. You've probably heard of it. What can you tell me about the Roswell craft?
Fortunately, those details were not approved for me to talk about right now.
This much we know. In 1947, an object crashed in the New Mexico desert near the town of Roswell. The Air Force recovered material described as metallic and rubbery, though the government changed its story as to what it was, calling it a flying disc at first, then a weather or spy balloon. It just read ridiculous to me that the US Air Force had changed its story.
Yeah, and they added additional elements over time and tried to conflate additional programs to explain some of the events.
Why are these things crashing?
Yeah, some are landed, some are crashed, and I think that's an interesting discussion that's come up. As advanced as we are, as humans, right? Planes crash, cars crash. Just because you're some advanced sentience that has advanced technology doesn't mean some small percentage of your, I'll use the Air Force term like sorties, meet an unfortunate operational conclusion, as we might want to say.
Most people would tell you the Roswell incident has been thoroughly debunked. In fact, the Air Force published this report in 1994 to put the issue to rest once and for all. Grusch has read it.
That analysis I did was a total hack job, and even anybody with analytical skills, if you read it, you can deduce that they're conflating multiple situations with crash test dummies and mogul balloons, and they're just saying that the townsfolk who personally witnessed it were totally imagining things. They concocted that whole report just to disinform.
So the reason for the secrecy exactly is what?
Feudalistic dominance, who can have both asymmetric technology for, it seems like, just fueling the war machine.
Grusch says that through the 50s and 60s, encounters with the NHI continued, as did the cover-up. One incident in 1967, about which multiple Air Force veterans have gone public, involved UAPs tampering with the nuclear missiles at Malmstrom Air Base in Montana. They saw a craft, appearing to be intelligently controlled, hovered over a nuclear weapons silo and shut down 10 nuclear ICBM missiles.
It certainly looks like they want to understand how far we've advanced in our nuclear fizzle kind of technologies at the very least. I mean, it looks like preparatory probing activity. It might be innocent kind of scientific gathering, could be ISR probing.
Meanwhile, Grusch says the crash retrieval program continued. And while he won't reveal where the downed craft are stored, he does say that the people working with the technology have been putting themselves at risk.
You know, a lot of them, were injured looking at some of this stuff. You can imagine the nuclear, radiological, and biological risk to looking at an unknown, and a lot of them have literally suffered physically because of their service.
But as we know, anyone who's come forward claiming non-human intelligence is behind these incidents has been dismissed as delusional or deliberately deceitful. If you're right, if you're telling us the truth, everyone, the entire American public, has been lied to for decades.
Yeah, there's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the U.S. populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral.
Coming up,
It's 120 miles to the west.
new evidence and perhaps new attitudes in a new age of UAPs.
There was about 2 seconds that I will get skipped, but almost everything is there. I do apologize for that 2 seconds.
The American people need and deserve to know more.
Has the US government changed its tune? These are the videos that started it all. Footage captured by naval aviators on military-grade cameras that defied all prosaic explanation. Dave Grusch has investigated this one, shot in 2015 off the East Coast by fighter pilots from the USS Theodore Roosevelt. There's an industry of debunkers out there on the web who say, oh, they've got this all wrong, it's a jet exhaust at a distance, and the aircraft's turning. Give me an answer on that.
I had some optical engineering experts look at that, and the Raytheon AT FLIR system based on the pixel saturation and apparent size. It's certainly something that's not a jet. It might be some kind of natural phenomenon that's quite strange, but it's not as simple as a jet.
He has even stronger opinions about this UAP, now known to history as the Tic Tac, shot in 2004 in the Pacific by aviators off the USS Nimitz. And the Tic Tac?
Truly anomalous, absolutely technical vehicle, physical, and that's absolutely something that we didn't make.
Not of this world.
Most likely, yeah.
The videos were leaked in 2017, then officially released by the Pentagon in 2020. At the time, it seemed the Pentagon may have finally abandoned its obsession with secrecy and decided to do what other countries have been doing for decades: establish a properly funded, publicly accountable team to investigate reports of UAP. Dave Grusch was part of that team.
This is a hunt mission for what might somebody be doing in our backyard that we don't know about.
The task force set about investigating these incidents, including more recent events like the odd encounters that took place during naval exercises in 2019 off the coast of San Diego. This video, shot on the USS Omaha and later leaked to documentarian Jeremy Corbell, has received particular attention. It either zooms off so fast you can't see it or it sinks into the ocean, but it seems to drop. What do you know about it?
It was truly anomalous.
But Grusch says the promised new age of government transparency is a fallacy. For starters, he says the videos that have been released are just the tip of the iceberg.
There are many videos that are totally fair to release through a declassification process. And I find it very concerning from a transparency perspective that all that the department has declassified were those 3 famous videos. There are more concerning videos that left me with a lot of questions, yeah.
He says there are credible witnesses who could testify to Congress about spacecraft, big spacecraft.
A lot of them were very large, yeah. Like a football field kind of size. And I remember interviewing these personnel. I'm like, either these people are lying to me, they're having a psychotic break, or this is some crazy but true stuff that's happening, and I have no good explanation that's prosaic at all for this, because this is not explainable by, swamp gas, St. Elmo's fire, ball lightning, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is like tangible technical craft they're seeing up close and personal in some cases when I interview people.
And at the centre of it all, the crash retrieval program the government has never publicly acknowledged. A program, Grusch says, that's included at least one private aerospace company that is storing alien craft. Is that true?
That is how a lot of these relationships are. While I don't want to name the specific companies and government elements, but overall, the government has been the custodian of a lot of this, right? And they'll hand receipt it out to a cleared defense contractor to do some analysis, which I find highly unethical. You have basically a sole source arrangement, and you allow certain private corporate elements to look at this, develop a potential insight, and then sell it back to the government for profit. And I think that's totally unethical.
The problem you've got is there have been categorical denials from high-level officials in the US government, even presidents, that what you're saying is true.
Unfortunately, some elected officials were not brought in.
Only a few weeks ago, 19th of April, the head of the Pentagon's UAP investigations program, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, told Congress AARO, that's the Pentagon's UFO investigation body, has found no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics.
While a large number of cases in our holdings remain technically unresolved, this is primarily due to a lack of data associated with those cases.
Was that a lie?
Well, I know Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. I've known him for about 8 years. And, I expressed some concerns to Dr. Kirkpatrick about a year ago and told him what I was starting to uncover. And he didn't follow up with me. And he has my phone number. He could have called me. I hope he ultimately does the right thing. He should be able to make the same investigative discoveries I did. It's totally crazy if he doesn't.
So the implication here is that the head of the very body that Congress has ordered to tell the American public the truth about UAPs is possibly misleading the American public. Do you think the American public is being lied to?
Well, they've been lied to over the years, and I'm hoping that the lies stop.
Coming up, it gets even scarier. The UFO whistleblower says the NHIs aren't all friendly. Have human beings been hurt or killed by a non-human intelligence? And guess who they might be working with?
We're in a competition with their adversaries to understand this, and it's a multi-decade Cold War that has been under our nose for so long.
In the movies, the aliens are often portrayed as peaceful, even cuddling.
I'll be right here.
It would be nice if that were true, but Mr. Grusch says it's not. The common interpretation from some commentators is that there is a non-human species and it's incredibly benevolently well disposed to the human race.
Yeah, and I think that is the logical fallacy there is because they're advanced, they're kind. We'll never really understand full intent in that because we're not them, whatever them is or are. But I think what appears to be malevolent activity has happened. Based on not only nuclear site probing activities, witness testimony, I think at least if we look at it through a humanistic lens, it does appear negative, at least to us.
I've been told that there have been attempts to bring down craft, that we've acted offensively against non-human craft.
There have been instances, and there are certain techniques.
Have human beings been hurt or killed by a non-human intelligence?
While I can't get into the specifics because that would reveal certain U.S. classified operations, I was briefed by a few individuals on the program that there were malevolent events like that.
Now I'm scared. People have just heard you say non-humans may well have murdered human beings.
That seems to be the case at one point, yeah.
And there's more. Grusch says the United States is not the only country that's encountered NHI and their technology. He says our geopolitical rivals have their own crash retrieval programs, which they are also secretly exploiting for military purposes.
We're in a competition with their adversaries to understand this, and it's a multi-decade Cold War that has been under our nose for so long, and there is no good way to level the playing field and hold other nation states accountable if they're doing unethical or illicit activity as it relates to this subject. And I think the obtuse secrecy is actually putting us in a very dangerous position where a country might make a breakthrough. Let's say it's an adversary of ours, and it is so destabilizing.
You say there's been a Cold War behind the scenes with Russia and China.
There has been a Cold War with our peer adversaries, yeah.
Why hasn't Russia or China come out and spoken publicly about this?
I think they're in a similar, pickle as us, where it's they understand maybe some of the socioeconomic destabilization factors in their own society.
But if this non-human intelligence is so advanced, and at least some of them are malevolent, why haven't they destroyed us already? Perhaps some fragile yet combustible détente has been reached. Grusch has written an internal document about his discoveries that refers to agreements that risk putting our future in jeopardy. And it's quite clear that you're talking about agreements between America and non-human intelligences. Have we made agreements with non-human intelligences?
That's the kind of information I really hope national leadership is able to get to the bottom of.
I need to pin you down on this. Are there agreements between non-human intelligences and the American government?
I think that's a question that I would like to know all the details of as well.
We do know of at least one agreement among humans that's worth noting. This 1971 agreement between the US and the USSR on measures to reduce the risk of nuclear war. Whether or not you believe Dave Grusch, this document proves the two superpowers were aware that UAP existed, whatever they were.
If you look at Article 3 of that treaty, it talks about unidentified objects near nuclear facilities or interfering with communications. And that is a treaty that has been used, from what I understand, to notify each other if there's a concerning event.
And that's a way of saying to the Russians, hey, don't shoot at us. It's not us.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a concern because of the secrecy. There is an environment where you could have almost like a false flag, where true non-prosaic UAP situation could be contrived as, a provocation of something from a nation state, and we want to de-escalate that.
If this is true, if the stakes are so high, if the fate of the human race is at stake, perhaps it's no surprise to hear Grusch say the US government will do anything to keep these secrets safe. Can I put it to you that crimes must have been committed?
At the very least, I saw substantive evidence that white-collar crime was committed.
Have people been killed to protect this secret?
Based on the people I talked to, that was an ongoing concern. Yeah, unfortunately, I've heard some really un-American things I don't want to repeat right now.
So you have a strong suspicion that people have been murdered to protect this secret?
Over the years, yeah.
Coming up, a reality check. Is it possible that you're deluding yourself? It's time to put our whistleblower's credibility to the test. Everybody watching this right now is looking at your face. Mm-hmm. They're going, is this guy for real? Let's talk about what Dave Grusch doesn't have. He doesn't have smoking gun documents or photos. He doesn't have official confirmation of his claims. He's just a guy talking on camera, and a lot of his answers to our most pointed questions sound like this. Can you comment?
Unfortunately, I cannot.
So who is this guy really?
I don't want fame or fortune. I'm just here to provide public leadership on an issue that I uncovered, and I thought it was totally outrageous.
NewsNation has confirmed through multiple sources that Dave Grusch is who he says he is, an Air Force veteran from Pittsburgh who worked in military intelligence and was part of the UAP task force. Maybe he's just a confident, well-spoken, ex-military intelligence officer who just happens to have lost his mind. Do you have any kind of mental illness?
No.
Have you ever had a psychosis, a delusion?
No.
Is there anything in your medical history that might be capable of being interpreted as a reason why you might be confabulating, making things up?
No, I'm not a disgruntled employee. I resigned on my own accord because I thought altruistically it's more appropriate to show thought leadership on the outside on this now, because I hit an impasse within the government to try to right this wrong.
So I've got to be blunt about this. Yeah. You're not making this up. This is not a lie.
No, absolutely not.
Because everybody watching this right now is looking at your face. Mm-hmm. They're going, is this guy for real?
I am for real. And I'm sitting here at great personal risk and obvious professional risk by talking to you today.
You've told us that we really are not alone. Even though you believe what you say is true, you haven't been fed disinformation. It's a common thing in intelligence for governments to mislead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was very sensitive to that fact. Was this some kind of ruse against me? Am I being used in any kind of way? And I took about 4 years being very methodical before I filed my whistleblower complaint to be absolutely certain of these basic facts.
So take me through the process of how you convinced yourself that this is real.
Mm-hmm. Well, based on the credentialed people that came to me, some of these subjects provided me sensitive foreign intelligence to read, sensitive program documents and photographs to evaluate, and then described in very specific detail how all this worked. And they were telling me the exact, extremely specific details that it all checked out. Yeah.
You know, the thing I have trouble with, it's the fact that my experience as a journalist is it's very hard for governments to keep secrets. Most things leak. Mm-hmm. Your government leaks like a sieve. Mm-hmm. Why hasn't this leaked?
Well, I've certainly been the recipient of a lot of U.S. government secrets, and I can tell you they've never seen the light of day. That's for sure. And I guess ostensibly this has leaked like a sieve for decades, but it was a very sophisticated disinformation campaign where they have allowed some of the truth to come out, through some of their trade crafts, but they've disenfranchised people, they've stigmatized it, they made it like this total like wacky thing to talk about. So anybody who may come forward with that kind of information is looked like a total tinfoil hat guy, because it's a perfect amalgamation of disinformation to just make it look crazy.
The best reason to believe Dave Grusch may be this document. Remember that whistleblower complaint he filed? It would seem it hasn't fallen on deaf ears. So the Inspector General of the Intelligence Services of the United States has the information you've got.
Yes.
And more importantly, the Inspector General made a determination about the credibility of your complaint.
They found, after interviewing myself and the subjects and other subjects that I'm not even cognizant on who they were, they found my complaint urgent and credible for the intelligence committees.
The word credible is important,
yes.
You appreciate. So an official investigatory body of the United States government has determined that your allegations are credible.
Correct.
Coming up, if it is true, then what? What are we going to do if the biggest secret on the planet is now out in the open? And what are they going to do? How will the non-human intelligence react? Ever?
Absolutely.
Give me some hope here.
Yeah.
There are good people.
There are very good people, and I want that message to be crystal clear. Let's not demonize holistically the U.S. government. There's a whole army of people that want change. I am one of tens, if not hundreds, of individuals within the government on these programs that would like a change.
What kind of change does David Grusch want? As he's said here tonight, he wants the NHI technology to be shared so the rest of the world can benefit from it.
And I use nuclear weapons or nuclear physics as an example. It's an acknowledged program. We have nuclear weapons. You don't get to know the designs, but nuclear physics holistically is unclassified. Academia studies it. And why would you suppress basic astrophysics, astrobiology, other hard and soft sciences broadly? It's totally nuts.
Grusch has left the government. He wasn't part of ARROW during the most recent congressional hearings when still more UAP were revealed, including this one captured by a drone in the Middle East in 2022.
There it goes.
His whistleblower case will take months to conclude. In the meantime, he says he's starting a scientific foundation. And he's willing to speak to anyone in Washington who has the clearance and the desire to hear the classified information he could not share here.
I make myself available to Secretary Austin, DNI Haynes, who was a recipient of my complaints. I'm happy to further brief elected officials on the specific ecosystem of secrecy down to the fine details.
Whoever they are. How will the non-human intelligence react to the revelation that human beings now know they're here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the non-human intelligences have been around for a while, at least multiple decades in modern history, and they've allowed ourselves to annihilate ourselves, genocide, war, famine, etc. So at the very least, I think they're kind of neutral on what humans decide to do with their free will.
And as for how we, the human race, will react to his story, here Grusch evinces that quintessentially human characteristic, optimism.
I don't have this utopian ideology that this is going to, solve world problems, stop war entirely. But all I want is a moment of pause and to see if the subject unites us, as we've obviously become more divided over the last couple of decades.
Because, if anything else, what you're revealing may mean we all start thinking of ourselves not as American, Australian, Russian, Chinese, but as human.
Human family. I think that's totally the right term, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so now we are going to attempt to process this all together. Hey, everybody, I'm Brian Enton. I'm live at the NewsNation headquarters in Chicago.
Normally known as...
The follow-up for this is just as good because the main reporter is talking on this. I'm going to load that up right now. So please be patient while I load it into Premiere. Okay. And that starts now.
A skeptic or someone somewhere in the middle, which I think is most of us. We know that that conversation with the UFO whistleblower, it was a lot to take in. So for the next hour, we're going to digest it all together. We've got military officials who say that they have seen unidentified aerial phenomena joining us live. They're going to be with us. Also, you're going to hear from lawmakers who are taking whistleblower David Grusch's claims seriously. Everything that you just heard, this is now going to result in a congressional hearing. Congress people say there will be a hearing over all of this. And the very credible reporter who broke the story tells us about other sources that she has who she says back up Grusch and everything that he said. But we want to start tonight with the journalist who sat with David Grusch for hours, Ross Coulthart. He joins us live now. Ross, incredible interview. We checked into David Grusch's credentials. We did our own due diligence here at NewsNation. All of his credentials stack up, but there's nothing like actually sitting down with someone, looking them in the eye for hours face to face to really get a read on them. Why do you say that David Grusch is so believable here?
Look, the most persuasive thing for me is the simple fact that I was introduced to Mr. Grusch by people who told me about him from within the legacy UAP crash retrieval program. I wrote a book about this subject a couple of years ago, and because of the contacts that I made in the course of researching that book, I became aware of the existence of the crash retrieval program, and I became aware of the existence of Mr. Grusch, who was basically conducting his investigations for the UAP task force. I've known about him for some time, and many people have vouched for his credibility, and indeed I've heard nothing but good about him.
The number one thing that I've heard, Ross, my friends have been texting me for the last hour. First of all, they've been riveted by your interview, but most of my friends have texted me, look, I'm skeptical because I want to see proof. I'm going to remain skeptical until I can actually see some evidence of this.
I can assure you and your viewers, Mr. Grusch wants you to see the proof that he has seen. The difficulty is that the crazy thing about ARROW, which is the current investigative body that is supposedly charged with investigating the phenomenon, is that the Congress has mandated that the public get to know the truth. But the Pentagon has neutered the very body that it's trusted to do these investigations. It doesn't have the Title 50 classified information access that Mr. Grusch had. Because of Mr. Grusch's extraordinarily high security classification, he was allowed to see, hear, and read things and talk to people who Congress isn't even allowed to talk to, and who members of ARROW, the Pentagon's supposed UFO investigation body, aren't allowed to talk to. And so he wants you all to see that evidence. And so that's the reason why he's gone to the Inspector General with his reprisal complaint, who referred him on to the Congress, and he's given evidence detailing all of that information to the extent that he can to those confidential committees in secret hearings, the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And it's that information that he now wants brought out, hopefully in an open, transparent public hearing.
It's a good point you make that ARROW, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, they're the ones who are supposed to be investigating the UFOs. He claims they don't even have the information that they need. They don't even really know what's going on. But I've got to ask you, you've been studying this stuff for a long time. Do you believe everything that he said? Because I kind of walked away from it thinking, like, some of it I found to be believable. Other parts I felt more skeptical of. Do you think everything he says is truth?
Look, it's ultimately impossible for you and me to test his claims. What he wants is for his claims to be tested. He wants us to be skeptical. The reason he's come forward is because he's frustrated that what's happening at the moment is the Pentagon, frankly, is engineering a cover-up. It's lying to the American public. I can say that because I'm an Australian. Throw me in jail if you like. But the simple fact is, your Pentagon, your Department of Defence is lying to you. And I know that because I've spoken to people in the program who tell me that what Mr. Grusch is telling you is the truth. And the huge frustration that he and indeed some of his own colleagues who are still in Arrow feel is that you, the American public, deserve the truth. Now, the thing that I really respect and admire, I trained as a lawyer as a younger man, and I love and respect the American Constitution. You have transparency and accountability controls in your Congress that are absolutely magnificent. And people like Dave Grusch, he's only one of an enormous number of people who've now come forward and indicated their willingness to give evidence to the Congress. They've given evidence in secret to those committees in the Congress. The Congress already has this information. There are members of your so-called Gang of Eight, the people who are entrusted in your Congress with the most sensitive secrets, who I know what Mr. Grusch is telling them. And it's incumbent on the American public to demand of your government not the secrets of how this technology works. I can understand why you might want to keep that confidential. I'm told that the technology that is represented by these devices is a dreadful weapon. It could do terrible things. It could destroy the planet. So I can see the need to classify that aspect of it. But I think the fact that there's been an 80 to 90-year cover-up that has concealed, not just from the American public, but from the world, the existence of these craft, the existence of multiple species of non-human intelligence, and moreover, the most important thing, the technologies. I've spoken to people in the legacy program who have told me it's getting nowhere. They're not getting the scientific advancements they want, even though they have this technology in front of them, because they don't have the ability to share this information with other scientists. That's the key issue.
It's just so much. Look, I get that this is what you have done for a long time, and you know the ins and outs. For people on the outside, it's so much for us to take in. I was just thinking about, 20 years ago, you were thought to be kind of crazy if you talked about UFOs. The government said there was no program at all. It wasn't really until 2020 that they opened up and said they did have a secret program all those years looking into things, even released some videos. Earlier this week, Ross, I interviewed Leslie Kean, a very respected journalist, broke some of those stories in the New York Times back in 2020.
That is correct. This is a reaction because it falls underneath the fair use. I mostly wanted to just broadcast this because it is important and mostly a reaction. I do have about 7 minutes left of this video. I don't plan on actually live streaming the rest of it, but this piece with the reporter I do believe is the meat and potatoes of the story.
About that secret government program also broke this story involving the whistleblower David Grusch. She says, much like you, that she has other sources too, sources who don't even know David Grusch, who back up what he says. I want you to listen to what she said, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
I believe it because of all the sources I have who have told me the same thing. So who am I to doubt these very, very high-level people who have been inside these programs for decades, have done their work, and are all telling me the same thing? I mean, I don't think there's some kind of conspiracy among all these people who don't know each other to make something like this up.
And something else I think is significant is that David Grusch, the whistleblower's attorney who represented him through this process, is the former Inspector General to the intelligence community. So would he really take on a case like this with his reputation if he didn't believe it to be true? I think that's an important side to all of this. But in terms of what Leslie said, Ross, do you also have sources totally separate from Grusch who back up what he said?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I was first introduced to the existence of the crash retrieval program by a great American called Nat Kovitz, who was the former head of research and development, the chief geek, if you like, for the US Navy. And Nat, God bless him, was dying from cancer, but he made a decision very close towards his end to tell me the truth. And I put part of that into my book, but I didn't reveal the full extent of what I was told. I was introduced by Nat to people who led me to other people who were working in the legacy program. And that's why I'm so sure that this is real. And it's why I'm so disappointed that the oversight controls in your Congress don't appear to have worked, because incredibly, the scientists say they don't think that the Congress, even the presidents, have always been told the truth about this. That's the thing that concerns them, that there's been this secret program going on, funded by you, the US taxpayer, at enormous expense. And yet the whole thing has been kept secret from most people in the Congress, particularly from the oversight committees that actually have the right and the responsibility to know about programs like this.
Yeah,
and I know for a fact presidents have been denied. Presidents have been denied briefings on this stuff. And I guess as somebody who's legally trained, I just think that's appalling. It represents a breakdown in the accountability controls in your government. People have exceeded their authority. And I'll tell you one thing that really shocked me. One person in the program told me that they refer to the President of the United States is not briefed in most cases, into the program because he is, quote, a temporary employee. The arrogance of these people is palpable. That's what shocks me. There are a cadre of people who have taken it upon themselves to keep a secret for no good reason. The public have a right to know that people are engaging with a non-human intelligence on this planet.
Let me ask you this, Ross. Sorry to interrupt you, but when David Grusch...
So when he starts to interrupt him here, he asks him some good questions. They're going to go into the question of how many aliens are there extraterrestrials. Since this is a commentary, I am going to add it for copyright reasons, that it is pretty neat that, information like this comes out. I personally think it unifies humans. The Fermi paradox is an interesting paradox, because why haven't we seen aliens given the size of the universe? Now, his next question I do enjoy. I just wanted to insert that. We have about 3 to 5 minutes left. I do appreciate you guys joining. You can download this later. I've put the link to the actual live stream. And just thank you for being here today. And please check out openmuscle.org. It's my open source and open hardware prosthetic sensor. Completely free. Just let people know about it.
Grusch talked about quite a number. That was his quote. Quite a number of these non-human craft that exist out there that are in storage. Were you able to nail him down on that anymore? I mean, is it a couple? Are there dozens? Do we know what he meant?
Look, I have a very good idea of how many there are, but David, in the interview with me, explained that he doesn't want the public to know yet because he doesn't want our adversaries to know. He doesn't want the Russians or the Chinese to know too much about how advanced the Americans are in terms of what they've been able to recover. And that's because I know from my own sources, the Russians particularly, but probably also the Chinese, have also recovered non-human technology. What's been going on, Brian, is a secret Cold War, a battle between the great powers to gain control of this technology and to master it. And the terrible thing is, if you think about the fact that your president controls a technology that can literally destroy the planet, nuclear weapons, and we've known that these UAPs are interfering with these nuclear sites. There's a great book about this by a friend of mine, Robert Hastings. But the thing that really does worry me is that there's a real risk. If the public don't know this, if military commanders don't know this, there's a real risk of an escalation where a UAP is confused for an enemy attack, and we end up with a situation where nuclear missiles are launched by mistake.
Yeah, listen, I hear what you're saying, but when you talk about a Cold War and secret non-human craft in multiple countries, again, it's hard to wrap your mind around and to think that something like that could really remain a secret all of this time with social media and camera phones and everyone pretty much knowing everything these days. Ross, stay there. We're going to keep you part of the conversation. I want to bring in 2 people who say they've actually seen UAP, essentially UFOs firsthand.
This is the section where I started to leave off. So this is a social commentary kind of on this story has been, kind of in the making for a while. We should see a congressional hearing about this information. The person in charge of the whistleblower complaint said not only was he credible, but this was an urgent matter. So yes, this could easily be a psyops, but just given the reporters that haven't had their names be tarred and feathered in the community when it comes to ufology or whatever, unidentified aerial phenomenon, whatever the whatever, they seem to all corroborate the same story, even though these people don't know each other. I just thought that this was a good opportunity to share it because I could not find a link online. I wanted you guys to see it because things like this kind of bring us all together. And that's what my channel is about. I do open source and open hardware prosthetic sensors. I do this stuff because it makes me feel good. I believe that if you help other people, you will actually feel the best you can be. But yeah, I appreciate you guys for joining, and I do want to mention a couple of resources if you think that this is pretty interesting. So since the Nimitz the videos came out, and the Pentagon said it was pretty much official, since this reporter so aptly stated that the whistleblower complaint was credible and urgent. There are two interesting stories that you can find out about. You probably don't know this, but Charles Hall. So Charles James Hall, I think is his middle name, wrote a book. Supposedly this was just about his memoirs that he wanted to leave for his grandchildren. Now, if you read, he has 5 books. They're called Millennial Hospitality. And he talks about how he met these entities. I'll let you be the judge, but it actually coincides with all of these things. And amongst all of my ventures online, it's very hard to see what's credible or not, especially if you look for things. And I'm a curious person, so I've scoured the internet. I wear a hacker hat, so I do think I know what I'm doing a little bit of the time if I'm trying to get my hands on information, completely legally, of course. But this Charles Hall story, pretty interesting. Not many people know about it, and it kind of checks out. But if you're entertained by that type of stuff, also join me for other live streams. I do coding, interactions. I love to talk about philosophy and what makes us all tick. But this is amazing. I am going to play just the rest of this clip while you guys can chat. Please feel free to comment, and I just appreciate you guys. And let's see if we can make a positive difference in this world. And I hope humanity is united, regardless of the veracity of these claims. But I personally believe that it is true, and he's telling the truth.
Seen it in the video too. The Pentagon shared it publicly. Sean Cahill is a former Navy chief who saw the so-called Tic Tac in 2004, and Alex Dietrich is a retired Navy lieutenant commander who also saw the Tic Tac. That video is unbelievable. It's really an honor to have both of you with us tonight. First of all, I want to ask you, Alex, first, what did you make of David Grusch's story? I know you've seen the interview. Do you find it believable?
So yeah, this is the end. So yeah, the tall whites, that's exactly what I was talking about. So I'm going to pull up that website because Millennial Hospitality, it's a really old website. But the guy is pretty, he talks about the tall whites. And so the story, the reason why I like it so much is that it's plausible. And in his story and in his books, he talks about why he's able to tell this, which it kind of makes sense. Like, why is someone from the government actually able to talk about the things that this guy is talking about? And yeah, this is his old school website. I'm going to paste this in the chat. I've read all of his books, rather I've listened to the audio tapes, but I'm going to summate them for you because it looks like people are still here. He was pretty much in charge of a weather satellite. He was in the prospect of going to Nam, and he gets this instruction in a desert. There's this folklore at this base, and in this base, they heard of something called Range 4 Harry, which is this radioactive horse, right, that got irradiated from the nuclear tests. So that's what he says. So he goes through these books. Again, he states that these are memoirs for his children that he's leaving, and it turns out they're extraterrestrials. It's an interesting roller coaster ride. But this guy talks about the pill-shaped craft, and he actually saw them, gives account to them, And we also see the case that the Pentagon released with the footage from those UAPs, which looked just like it. And in this interview, you heard him say the one that rotated, that was kind of cool. But the one that actually was the tic tac, so to speak, it was the one he verified that it was a technology beyond our own. It wasn't something that could be anomalous, like something blowing in the wind. So that relates to Charles Hall, which relates to all this other stuff. And he also stated, and David also stated that it could have been a psyops. He spent 4 years researching it. Yeah, but it's just crazy how it all lines up. Now, I think there is that other gentleman, Lou Alestranzo. I can't pronounce his name. I probably butchered it, but yes. So, yeah, he also said that we've recovered craft. He also uses this word dimension, which makes it interesting. This world could be a lot smaller than we know. But let me see the chat. I'm so sorry. It's flying by. Maybe he's just talking about Caucasians. Yeah. He could be. It means we'll end up with actual science advancements for the better of humanity. Then David G should just become known as a hero. Yeah. So what do you guys think about the guy that pretty much brought Area 51 to the map? I can't think of his name for some reason. I can see his glasses. Wow, what a butcher of Louis. Yeah, Elizondo's. Yes. I don't claim to be an entertainer. I claim to be a commentary. Whether or not my commentaries are good or bad is up for you to make the decision with upvote or downvote. So we should had this tech a long time ago. Yeah, so if you also want to see another interesting, this Charles Hall one is fascinating. One that's equally fascinating is the Carrot documents. The Carrot documents are quite crazy because those supposedly somebody by the name of Isaac talked to West Coast AM and released these documents. There were some pictures of these craft that look like drones. It's really hard to get a hold of some of these links, and it looks like I pulled it up. So this is the link for the Carrot documents. Now, what I find interesting about the Carrot documents and this whole story is that Alienware actually used some of the wording from the text in this document on one of their computers. And so people say, oh, it must have been Alienware, so it's a chicken and the egg type scenario. When if you read about it, really either this guy named Isaac is telling the truth or not, but he says that this is spacecraft. But it's so hard to read. You get inundated with information if you research the UFO topic, which, like David Grusch was saying, if you actually, and I mispronounce his name, if you look, the United States government, if he's true, that they have been lying to us, they have their own pretty much psyops campaign running against the American public and even could have killed people. So, I mean, this isn't anything new when it comes to there have been actual reports of the United States government lying to the American public, so it is nothing new. Governments, just like people, are corrupt. This is way bigger than presidents, yeah. Well, it's way bigger because, I don't know, a lot of people thought that if the United States were to come out with the fact that aliens exist, they would try to pretty much just take over control from the populace. A lot of smart people that I talk to and I revere state that you should be afraid when you see governments start talking about aliens because maybe they're trying to conform you to one thing or another. That's my fear. What do you guys think? I'm trying to read the comments as they fly past here. Did anyone else see the chat with Chris Leto had with Dr. Greer last week that actually knew this whistleblower was coming forward, and that discussion was mind-blowing? That sounds pretty interesting. That was Infinite 8 loop music. So I have not. I should look that up. This is way bigger than Presidents. It's going to sound funny, but think the movie Dune. Yeah? Well, Greg's wow darn. What if protect government involvement? They outsourced to private sector already. Yeah, so that's what the general consensus is that the government has outsourced this to the private sector, so it's behind. It's doesn't have to do with the Information Act, so people can't just pull information from it. But what's fascinating about this carrot, let me just talk about this and read part of the chat, is that the guy Isaac states that these symbols actually are some kind of program, and that just operating these symbols inside of this field, that somehow they'll magically work, when if you think about it, that's pretty much how silicon lithography works. However they make the actual doping of the silicon to make the semiconductors or the gates, it's pretty much a photo process, mostly in 2D. So these are plausible ones. So Millennial Hospitality is one of my first suggestions. Very interesting story. And he's a very dry author. He reads his own books, but it puts you into this like mood. And he's also a religious person, so it's interesting to hear his account as a religious person on what his mind alteration, what happened when he met what he calls the tall whites. So let me read this. Is it just me, or is it David catching the world up to where we in ufology have been in the 50s? Yeah, so I think people that are familiar with UFOs and ufology, we probably in the general consensus. I just like digital forensics, so my hobby is actually to stabilize UFO footage. Avoid Greer. A lot of people avoid Greer, and I agree. I can trust him as far as I can throw him. I'm not sure why, but I seem to be a decent judge of people. But that's just how I personally feel, not based off of any type of information. Could you clarify why people should be worried when governments talk about aliens? So the big worry is that there's been a couple papers written about this. I could try to find them. If a government says aliens exist and they're actually malicious toward humans, it's easy for them to say, oh, you need to do what we say, and we're going to introduce this scare. It's kind of like a shock doctrine or a scare tactic. So when I see governments saying that UFOs are coming out, or things like this, is the government behind it actually releasing this quote unquote whistleblowing? Are they behind it? It's something I should be leery of. My father was actually not born in the United States, so I kind of grew up with the understanding that governments are corrupt. So we should always be, I don't know, it's our diligence, we should as citizens try to be proper citizens and make sure we keep our governments in check, I guess, because they can go screwy and they can make the wrong decisions. And I do believe that was the impetus behind this whistleblower. He has very high credentials. He's been up there. He pretty much has everything, the credentials you'd want, and even the whistleblowing complaint, they called him credible and this complaint urgent. So it's quite fascinating. It's quite cool. Yeah. So in Congress, testimony is real, whether you think it's Greer, New Age, false prophet or not. Yeah, a lot of people. So Lou, I'm not going to pronounce his last name. Maybe I mispronounced his first name, states that what you were taught as a kid is just, with the information that the insiders have, this David being one of them, it's a paradigm shift, right? So it is a crazy paradigm shift if all of a sudden it is true that aliens exist. So how can you psychologically deal with that? Let's say you're religious or whatever. That's why I like these Millennial Hospitality series, because his mind goes through this psychotic break in like half of the first book, I think, and he is dealing with the ramifications of seeing something that is smart and humanoid, and he's interacting with it, and it does not line up with everything he's been told his entire life. The show with aliens will only be popular in the US. This show with aliens, yeah. Always be cautious. So another theory I'm thinking now is convenient timing. New fighter jets announced, new stage, a fight with a UAP, maybe a fake man-made one, and bam. Huge military budget suckers. Yeah. Sorry, I can't read that well from afar. Yes, that is correct. Resonate says at Enoch witness 4 foot tall entities who wore hooded jackets. Interesting. Trust no one, says Kim. Oh my goodness. So Roswell happened. A ufologist once said Roswell is a black hole. No one who researches it ever go to the bottom of it, even 50 years later. Yeah, well, it would make sense, right? So that's what's so difficult. If alien technology or non-human technology, maybe it's time travel, has been found and it is even 100 years more advanced than humans. Well, just imagine what 100 years ago was like right now. So 1923. So yeah, if we brought some of the modern days, it would seem like magic. So since it's powerful, they even stated that in the show that we watched. It is dangerous. So how do you release that? Lou talks about there needs to be some type of process since this information has been held secret for what, 90 years, 70 years, since it has been so long. We need to, if we want to step forward, kind of conquer this. I've heard there's some interesting feelers out that I have on Reddit, on Discord servers. There's interesting parts of ufology that I don't necessarily follow because it is overwhelming, right? I usually try to ask the question, how does this deal with my day-to-day life? But it is fascinating. The older I get, the more I try to figure out what is my purpose in life. If there are, in fact, other entities beyond that are conscious, sentient, beyond humans, I mean, I honestly first want to just grasp to be, what are the answers to life? You know, like, I don't know, like the common questions. I want them to solve all the problems. But technology and advancements may not solve all of our problems. But I do believe that as we become more technologically advanced, we are trying to, as a society, in my opinion, increase joy and decrease suffering. So, yeah, it seems that if the statistics that I've looked at, for the most part in history, torture and some measures of suffering have actually gone down, even though there are interesting things out there. Thanks so much for this chat and live stream. Cheers, everyone. I agree with that. I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much for joining. Please check out Open Muscle. It's an open source and open hardware prosthetic sensor I designed using artificial intelligence and off-the-shelf components. I do that in my free time because I do believe that we can make a difference in this world by applying our time, our treasures, and our talents. And those, we have three things pretty much at our disposal: our time, our energy, and money. And what we do with those resources, kind of, we can make a difference in those areas. So with that, I'll leave off with, let's see if we can make a positive difference.